We'll start the Cedar Springs Planning Commission meeting of Tuesday, October 1st, 2024 at 7 o'clock. And we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Roll call then. Mr. Brzezinski.
Here.
Mr. Hoag.
Here.
Mr. Merlington. No, see Mr. Merlington.
Heard anything?
Ms. Naparowski. I don't know about Mr. Nixon. Mrs. Powell.
Here.
Mr. Conley is here. We also, of course, have Ms. Falcon, the city manager, Mr. Moore, the city planner, and Ms. Johnson, the city clerk, in attendance tonight. The first thing we need to do then is to look at the meeting minutes. Ooh, I got loud. It started picking me up here. Look at the meeting minutes for August 13th, 2024, and see if we can approve those or if there's anything that needs to be changed.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from our previous meeting.
Support.
Is there anything anyone would like us to look at before we move forward with that? Hearing nothing, all in favor of approving the August 13th, 2024 minutes, please signify with aye.
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 Aye. All opposed? Okay. Minutes. And then next we have to look at our agenda for this evening. Obviously, that's page 1 of your packet. And before we could continue.
Approve this month's agenda.
I'll second that.
So any reason why I shouldn't or why we shouldn't approve tonight's agenda? Hearing none. All in favor of approving tonight's agenda?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We have an agenda.
Okay.
Okay, the public comments period. Actually, there's no one in attendance here. Is there anyone on Zoom? Okay, so I'm going to consider that the opportunity for public comments and move on. Item 7, conflicts of interest in ex parte communication. Does anyone on the planning commission have any of the above to report before we move on? Hearing none. Item 8, there are no scheduled public hearings. Item 9, there are no site plan reviews, which gets us all the way to item 10. So not bad for 3 minutes. Other business. Item A on other business is the master plan update, review of survey results.
All right, so we have some results to report to you. These are just got entered in and tabulated within the last week, which is why they weren't in your packets. But I'd like to continue the review and conversation on the master plan with you this evening just by reviewing the results. So on the screen here, Rebecca has the results up, and we'll just kind of go through them briefly one at a time. And of course, if there are questions or discussion points, feel free to just kind of jump in.
And I didn't. Can we make that?
Zoom in a little bit. Yeah, there we go. And I can kind of go through each of these broad takeaways. So the first series of questions are just sort of background information. So this one we just kind of we ask in what type of residence people live, and the overwhelming majority of respondents, 85%, said a single family home. 1% were in duplexes, 4% manufactured, 5.6% multifamily. I should also note that we got about 180 of these back in the mail, so it wasn't quite as good as I was hoping for, but still 180 surveys returned, I think was, pretty decent rate of return, and ends up being, I want to say, in the little under 20% range. We sent out more than 1,000 of these, so it was a good response. As per usual, we get most of these back pretty quickly. There's a couple of things in the results here that I want to kind of highlight that I liked in terms of the responses, and I think will help us moving forward. You asked if people owned or rent their home, so the majority of respondents owned them, 90% of them. We sent this out not to property owners, but to all a sample of, it was all registered voters, because we wanted to make sure that we included some of the city's renters and it wasn't just going to landlords and owner occupied houses. So we did get, again, it's mostly owned, which is what I expected, but we did get about 10% of the respondents were renters. On the next one, we asked how long people lived in Cedar Springs. We got a pretty good breakdown here between people who have lived here for fewer than 3 years, which was 18%, 3 to 9 years was a quarter, and then 25 years was 22%, and then longer than 25 years was 35%. So a lot of times when we do these mail surveys, we get a lot of responses from people who are seniors and who have lived in the community for a very long period of time. So with a lot of these background questions, and we'll see some more coming up, I'd like to see kind of a pretty good cross section of responses here in terms of how long they've been here. And the next one is age. So this one actually surprised me a bit because with mail surveys, 65 to 74 and 75 and older usually skews way out of proportion with the rest of the respondents. It's like 3/4 of our results come from people who are over 65. This one, except for the 19 to 24 demographic, which I think was like one person, everyone else, all the other age brackets that we have listed out here gave us a pretty good number of responses, and it was fairly even, which I was encouraged to see. So 25 to 34 was 14%, 35 to 44 was 16%, 45 to 54 was about 14%, and so on. So there's a little bit of skewing towards the older demographic, which isn't surprising, but like I said, usually it's way more dramatic than that. So again, I was happy to see kind of a broad cross-section of the community, so we know that the results that we're looking at aren't just one particular age group that's focused on a certain set of issues. We have a broad range of feedback from everybody in the city. The next one, we asked where they primarily worked. So not more than half, more than a third said they retired. More than a quarter said they worked in the Grand Rapids area, and almost 20% said that they worked from home. Those were kind of the top three categories there, which was the large majority of respondents. About 7% worked in Cedar Springs, 4% in Rockford, 2% elsewhere in Kent County, and then a few other places. So I think probably not surprising to anybody in the room. A lot of people were retired, which is reflected by the number of people who responded that were over the age of 65, right? And then not surprising anybody, I don't think, is that the next largest group of people who are employed work in the Grand Rapids area, not within the city of Cedar Springs. Number 6 asks how many persons are in your household, or how many persons are in your household. So the average was two adults and 1.8 kids. So again, about tracks with what we see in like the census information and things like that. The next one asks about age for your age and the age of other adults in the household. So again, this is similar to the question previously, a nice distribution of responses here. And again, we're looking for how big the households are. So we see under the 18 to 25, there are a number of families with other adult 2 and other adult 3 is in that same age bracket. So there's some roommate situations or parents living with 2 children who are over the age of 18, or 1 or 2 kids who are over the age of 18. But we have a lot of households, I think, that only have 2 people in them in the city, which again, not super surprising given the number of retirees who did answer the survey. But I think when we're thinking about how and services and stuff like that, it's if we're thinking about how many people live in the household, there might not be a large demand for like, 5-bedroom homes, right? It might be 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom homes might be something that we need to give more consideration to something that's bigger, because I think we have a lot of 1 or 2 person households in the city. Number 8 asks where people are most likely to go for goods or services. So the dark blue on top is grocery / household goods. The kind of purpley color is entertainment, and then the green on the bottom is recreation. So this is also what I expected to see. So you have a Meijer and Aldi now, so your groceries are going to be local. Entertainment, we see that 90% mark Grand Rapids for where they go for entertainment. And for recreation, they had elsewhere in Kent County. So that could be, county parks or parks in other communities or something like that. Could be, a variety of things. There's a lot of, good recreational opportunities, the trails, etc. So people might just say, yeah, we ride the trail, but it's not a Cedar Springs thing. We go someplace else, or we ride down to Rockford or something. So kind of an interesting match there, but again, not hugely surprising that groceries are local, entertainment, and GR, which is kind of what we expected to see. This was one of those check all that apply types of answers, which is why it doesn't add up neatly to 100% in any of those categories. Because people could say, well, I go to Grand Rapids for this, and I also go to, Greenville for the same thing. Like this one here that has a lot of people getting, groceries and household goods in Greenville. I'm assuming that's probably the Walmart effect. They have Walmart there, and that's the closest one other than Alpine, maybe. So it's probably a bit closer for people here. And then the next one, these are just some write-in comments. So whenever there's just a random block of text, we have if there's something not listed here, we ask them to fill in something. So there's just, again, kind of a variety of answers here. I think a lot of these Cadillac, other areas, Lakeshore, Newaygo, Muskegon, are probably recreation-based questions. Number 9, from the following list, please select the most important reason you have chosen to live in Cedar Springs. Again, this is a check all that applies, so it's not going to add up to 100%. But just more than half said small town lifestyle. Proximity to Grand Rapids was the next largest factor, followed by safe area, or they grew up here, or a lower cost of living, schools, parks and trails, etc. So close to GR, basically a small town close to GR would check the boxes for a lot of people. And again, I think if you were to do this, ask the same question in Rockford or Sparta or maybe even Greenville or Belding or a lot of places, I think a lot of them would probably select something similar. Again, there's a lot of write-in comments here. Some people just born here. Some people work here. Have Sparta. I have Sparta. I have family nearby, close to work, etc. Number 10 asked, in the next 5 years, do you expect to move out of Cedar Springs? About a third almost were unsure, and 15% said yes. So there is some kind of turnover or some potential, I guess, for turnover in who lives here again, which isn't terribly surprising, especially since you do have a fair number of rental properties in the city. They tend to be a little bit more transient and might not be as tied down to one specific area. About 60% of your residents thought that the city was growing about right as far as the pace of growth. About 70% said it's growing too quickly, and about the same number said it's growing too slowly, and about 10% didn't offer an opinion. In terms of rating the city's efforts to guide growth and development, a plurality, 40% said fair. A little more, almost a quarter said good. So kind of all over the map here. Again, there's a lot of people that just didn't have any opinion at all and probably don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. Which, obviously that large number of people without an opinion could, change the analysis quite a bit. So we don't get a lot of guidance with this, other than there's some people that are thinking like, yeah, it's okay. We're not experiencing explosive growth here with houses going up everywhere. But at the same time, it also is in a community that's stagnating, I guess. So this was one that we added in. How do you perceive the level of regulation under the current Cedar Springs zoning ordinance? A plurality said, I don't know. So about 40%. So I think that can be perceived as sort of an opportunity for the city to work on educating its residents in terms of what the rules are, or maybe how to find them. And that can be something that we talk about during the master plan process, is how we can do a better job of educating people what they can and can't do, what the regulations are. Um, the next largest group, of just more than a quarter, felt that they were overregulated by zoning. About 20% said properly regulated, and 12% said underregulated. So there were some people that, indicated underregulated, and another pretty good chunk said, what we do now is appropriate. That adds up to about a third of the city. And there are a lot of public comments in here that we'll talk about in a little bit that sort of speak to, or could be perceived to speak to zoning regulations, because there's a lot of comments in here about, like, the condition of properties and kind of enforcement and cleaning things up and stuff like that, which we'll talk about in a bit. Number 14, please rate your level of concern regarding the following issues. So these were sorted from most concerned to least concerned. So most concerned was the quality of groundwater, followed by quality of streets, traffic congestion, enforcement of zoning and property maintenance, traffic speed, quality of public utilities, so on and so forth, all the way down to lack of trails, bike lanes, and wide shoulders. So people are not concerned about that. Obviously, you guys have a trail that runs right through the heart of your community, which probably helps, decrease that type of a concern. I mean, obviously, you have very good access to grocery and household goods with multiple grocers in the city. There were a number of comments in here about water and sewer rates, which you'll kind of see as we scroll through the public comments here. But there wasn't anything as we went through here that was like an overwhelming kind of concern. Number 15, which I think lines up well with the previous question. So on number 14, the number one concern was quality of groundwater. And so number 15, in terms of potential city improvements, how important are the following? Protecting our groundwater was what looks like by a significant margin the most important priority that people had, which surprised me a little bit because most people are on public water and sewer services here. Obviously, that's sourced from groundwater, I think. So, and I think we've seen this in a bunch of different communities now, and especially in northern Kent County, there's this, very apparent public consciousness over PFAS contamination that Rockford is experiencing, and a lot of other communities have. I think that's something that people recognize that's, a critical resource, and that protecting it's going to be very important. Additional comments include here improving public roads, protecting private property rights, improving the downtown, improving traffic flow, preserving small town character. So a lot of what's identified in the previous question as concerns are reflected in the next question as, priorities moving forward. So there was a lot of congruency between those two questions, which I thought was kind of interesting. The next question asked about what types of housing people would like to see in the city. More than half said they would like to see additional single-family homes, which doesn't surprise me because that's kind of what everybody is used to. But there is, some support for two-family units, retirement communities, attached single-family, tiny homes. 16% didn't offer an opinion. 12% said multifamily. 11% said accessory dwellings. The same amount said they don't want any new housing in the city, and it kind of goes down from there. So this is a pretty typical kind of spread. I think a lot of people want to see what they're used to and what the city already has, which is a lot of single family. But I think there is some opportunity here to allow for additional housing types, whether it's 2-unit buildings or attached single family, like row houses or something. I think there's some potential to talk about that in the plan. Next question asks what kind of businesses you would like to see in the city, and the overwhelming favorite there was additional sit-down restaurants. By a large margin, that was the only one that got more than half. The other options include, or the other selections include general retail at 42% was the next one. Arts and entertainment, small retail, recreational or sports related business. Those were all around a third or higher. And then kind of the next step down, there's healthcare, industry, personal services, hotels, grocery stores, etc. Nobody wants any more fast food, apparently. I think you guys are all set there, according to your residents. There was only a few people indicated a desire for that. So again, in a lot of communities, we see a desire for more sit-down restaurants as being a very high and popular, type of business that people want. And there's a lot of suggestions on the next page about what people like or want to see here. Number 18 asked, how satisfied are you with the following aspects of Cedar Springs? So this one was also sorted from most satisfied to least satisfied. So people were most satisfied with the library. They were followed by being satisfied with the city as a place to live and as a place to raise a family, fire protection, quality of life. So I think these, to me, sort of suggest that there is a lot that people are sort of comfortable here. They feel safe. I think obviously if everyone feels like this is a great place to raise a family, I think that speaks to that a little bit. So one of the comments I made earlier was about there's some written comments about enforcement and property maintenance and stuff like that. So I noticed with this one, the things that people appear to be least satisfied with, the very bottom one was zoning and code enforcement. So again, this is it. As we think about the master plan, it makes us wonder if we needs to look at kind of how it handles zoning enforcement, if there's messy properties that need to be more aggressively enforced, or kind of what's going to happen with that and how that's going to be handled moving forward. So I thought that's an interesting observation that we can talk about.
Curious, how was the question worded? Because you could say someone had a problem with zoning and code enforcement from. So I wanted to make sure I understood how it was that were there.
That's why it scored the least.
So with this one, it was asked on the survey exactly as you see it on the screen. So it was, how satisfied are you with the following aspects? And then zoning and code enforcement was just listed as one of the options. So you're right, somebody who felt like they were getting picked on by the zoning enforcement officer could have been dissatisfied. Or somebody who doesn't think the zoning officer was doing enough could have also been dissatisfied. I think that's definitely possible. And so on the scale here, the dark blue, or the blue shades on the left is very satisfied to neutral to dissatisfied to very dissatisfied. So there's also a fairly large range of people who marked that as neutral, like 45, almost half of your respondents just were kind of didn't give a response. And because with some of the other questions, we also saw that they had kind of went like, they didn't seem to be sure about zoning or how it worked, or maybe they haven't really had to interact with that at all. There is, I think, I don't know, like pejoratively, but I think like there's a level of ignorance there that people just simply aren't aware of what goes on or how it's done or how it's handled or anything like that. But yeah, that's a
Question about the regulated, underregulated, overregulated, right?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, a lot of people said, I don't know. And so because there are so many neutrals in the middle there, I think that could be a similar situation for sure, that there are a lot of people that just aren't sure.
On that one directly about what they felt about that zoning, that might give us an indicator of if they think we're under or over.
Yeah, so there are the 16 comments underneath are directly related to this question. And I'll send this out to you guys. So all this data is pretty raw coming out of the survey. But there's multiple pages of written comments at the end of this thing that people filled in. And there are some comments in there too that also speak to enforcement. We can go through those here in a minute as well. Related to housing, please rate your level of concern regarding the following issues. So this was kind of an interesting one in that, um, there's a pretty significant level of concern on all of these. So lack of diverse housing types, which was the, sort of probably one that the least number of people were concerned about. Um, compared to cost of new housing, which 75% of people were either very concerned or somewhat concerned about the cost of new housing. And we've in recent years kind of seen that basically everywhere that we've gone, and the conversation around that has really changed. And people, there's again, like with the groundwater stuff, there's a fairly, established public consciousness now about the cost of housing and how expensive it is. Tied to that, increasing rent prices. Also, again, we have 40% of the respondents were very concerned about that, and then another 25 or so were at least somewhat concerned about it. So just cost related factors are clearly, weighing on people. And then the one above that, quality of housing available, again, that's almost 70% of the respondents were either very or somewhat concerned about the quality of housing that's available. Just a couple more here. So this one we just wrote a series of sentences and asked people to rate whether they agree or disagree with the following statements. So one, if more sidewalks and trails were provided, I would use them regularly. Here we had about a little more than 60% either strongly agreed or agreed. The next one, Cedar Springs should encourage additional industrial development to provide higher paying jobs. That one was almost 70% either strongly agree or agree. Strong zoning enforcement is needed to get some messy properties cleaned up. That was about 2/3 of respondents either strongly agreed or agreed with that. Cedar Springs needs to attract more commercial businesses. That was again more than 60% either strongly agree or agree. I would support short-term rentals being offered in the city. Was about 45% either strongly agreed or agreed, and then about 35% either said they disagree or strongly disagree, and about 20% didn't know. So that one, that's something that we've been talking about, mission level, and we were hoping this would give us some clarity, and it doesn't really give us a bunch. There seems to be some support for it, but it doesn't seem to be overwhelming, and it seems to be something that seems, kind of middle of the road in terms of public perception. There's not a strong feeling either way on that one, it doesn't look like. The last one, I would be willing to serve on a board or commission to support my community. We only got about a quarter of people strongly agreeing or agreeing with that. But, I would highlight that out of 180 responses, that gives you what, 30 or more than 40 people potentially to choose from who could be interested. So, there are people out there who would be interested and willing to serve. And again, this one also had the largest number of people that said they don't know. Almost 40% answered that one as saying I don't know. And I would guess that in those instances, people just might not know what they would be doing. In the past, when I've talked to people about joining a planning commission or a ZBA, they go, "What's that? What do you do?" They just don't know. So there could be some things the city can do that we can talk about to sort of make people more aware, or at least try to get people to be more aware about some of the services that the city offers that are not as visible as the obvious ones like streets and water and sewer and snow plowing and stuff like that. And then the rest of the comments, I believe, were just the written comments. Starting here I'm on page 19. If you keep going down, it's on page 19. I think you're on page, wait, oh, I'm sorry, I'm on page 30, go on to page 31 or 32. So these are all comments that are on the agree, disagree. that final question, but then we have like 7 pages of just handwritten comments if you keep scrolling. So yeah, there's a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot, but there are several comments in here related to enforcement or, you know, cleaning stuff up. But there's a lot of really good comments in here. Everything from traffic to, so if you keep going, there should be several more pages. Yeah, so this is the last question that just, so the very last question, there was just a big old box on the survey that said, write whatever you want here, basically. And so people did just that, and we have, with 70 people took us up on that offer, which is, you know, almost half of your total responses offered something. So we didn't need to go through every comment here, but there's all kinds of ideas and comments, from some being, you know, constructive and helpful and valuable, and others not so much. We did, I think at the end, we sort of classified them as best we could. So there were about 21 comments about street repair, lighting, intersections, snow removal, stuff like that. There were about 20 comments that related to taxes, and another 14 about water quality or water bills. There's 13 comments about zoning, or property, and just kind of a range of, you know, bunch of other things. As we tried to kind of lump these together as best we could into some kind of category, that's sort of what we came up with. So again, these are very unfiltered comments. So, you know, this obviously does not represent our opinions at all. That's just what people wrote, and we just put them in the report for you all to digest. So we'll send this out to you. So you can take more time over the next month to kind of think about the results. I think more importantly is, as we work through the master plan process, so the next step that we're going to take will be we'll start with the goals and objective statements from your existing plan, but we'll kind of build on those and add to them and modify them based largely in part on what we learned from the survey. So as you read through the results and kind of think about what people had to say and how the data looks, think about how we can translate that into, you know, policies for the city, whether it's, you know, advocating for additional types of housing, or, you know, adding additional land or having more language in there that supports or encourages certain types of business or industry, or if it's enforcement or infrastructure, all things that we're going to be needing to be thinking about as we work on the master plan. So I know there's a lot of information here. There's almost 40 pages worth. So are there questions based on this? Just kind of want to take a month and think on it. What we can do for the next meeting is maybe we can kind of pull out the goals and objectives from your existing plan. Maybe start working on some suggestions for new ones as we kind of move into the real meat and potatoes of planning for the long term.
Because that's the first time I've seen it, so I wanted.
Yeah, we were kind of just getting all of these entered, and then getting something turned around, and I want to make sure we had something for tonight, so that's why we're doing this on the fly. But yeah, you can have this right away. So you know, we'll be spending the next few meetings probably talking about master plan stuff in some shape or form, and a draft ready probably in sometime in the winter or early spring is kind of what I'm thinking timeline wise.
All right. Any questions or concerns before we move on? Okay. Thank you. The next 2 items on the agenda deal with the short-term rental law and the zoning amendment. So I was told that we, obviously, you all know we tabled this the last time around, and that we were tabling it until we had the results from the survey. And while we got a preliminary on this tonight. We didn't really have a chance to dive into what exactly the results were. So the suggestion was that we just move on and tackle that next month. I just have the question of, since they're tabled, do we need to take any kind of action to continue to table them? Or will they just stay there until we come back to them? Okay. So,
To discuss them.
It must come back next month. We can postpone it until it's ready and leave that determination to Andy and.
okay.
That language.
So then I guess the next question would be, is next month appropriate for this, or is there a better time for us, from your perspective, for us to go over this?
I think next month is probably fine. I mean, we haven't made any adjustments to the draft. And you know, as I noted, it didn't look like, based on when we went through the data, that we got a lot of guidance or strong feelings on this either way. So I was kind of hoping that we get like 2/3 or 3/4 of people saying, yes, I support this, or no, I don't. And we didn't really get that. So it kind of almost suggests to me that, you know, I think what you've taken in the draft is a fairly conservative approach, and that it is sort of collectively dipping its toe in the water. And I think we had, what, 5 or so licenses that could be authorized initially. So it's something where it's like, yeah, we'll kind of see if this works, and it's certainly able to be amended, but there are some people that definitely support it, but it's not everybody. So my initial thought was that the way that you had drafted this is probably pretty reasonable based on the survey results, but obviously, you know, we can continue to look at the data and see if we can identify any trends. And I should also mention that, if, with respect to short-term rentals or anything else, if there's additional analysis that you want us to do on this, or compare questions, or do cross tabulation of data to, you know, dive a little bit deeper into a topic, let us know, and we can do it and provide that for the next meeting too.
I do. I got a lot of questions. I think one of them is zoning. And as I see our zoning, we just, on the spur of the moment, limited it to B2 and R2. And single family homes. So if you go to, you got we discussed not allowing more rental properties in the R1 because it's a business, and we already settled that. We have expand our rental businesses in the R1, but we also have the R3, the R4, the mixed use. I don't know if there's any houses in the mixed use district. I didn't get a chance to look that up.
Trying to remember off the top of my head, we did some consolidation, and I can't remember if we actually have all of those anymore.
The R3 and R4, I know that.
Thought we collapsed one of those at least into one of the other R's, but I would have to go look at that.
That's why I think we need to look at that a little bit closer, because there are, you know, some 4 apartment buildings that maybe one person out of maybe they have 3 regular renters, and maybe they want to keep one open for, you know, the short term. But I don't see why we couldn't expand it into those other residential areas besides B2. And then we have the downtown business, which I think I counted once, there's like 19 houses in the downtown business area. So that was one that we kind of approved. But I think we really need to study and understand those districts before we say, let's do it. Just my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Looking at a zoning map, I was thinking the same thing. I don't know them off the top of my head. It'd be nice just to have one while we're having this discussion so we can see the streets and the locations.
And that this also brings up the other practical aspect of it. And obviously, from being on city council that we heard back that there was not, let's say something short of universal happiness about us sending this up to city council. So my question is this coming back on city council's agenda the next time that they meet before we meet again? Because if it is, and we're getting more direction from city council as to what they will eventually approve, that could definitely have a bearing on what we're doing here. So does anyone know what the agenda looks like?
Excuse me, the next council agenda packet goes out Thursday for October 12th meeting, but they've had a first read. I pulled it off the council agenda thinking it was needed to come back here first, then go back to city council, but maybe.
Not suggesting that it needs to be on council's agenda, but if it was going to be weighed in again from their perspective, that information, it's futile for us to recommend something if it's got strong opposition on the council. So I wanted to make sure if there was something still brewing there that we were aware of it and that we were acting accordingly. But I do also recognize we can't wait for approval to recommend. Eventually we're going to recommend and they're going to approve or they're not. But if there was something pending, I wanted to know about it.
I would feel more comfortable recommending anything until we've figured out what these residential districts are. I know some of them, I think where I live, it's like you could have apartments. I think that's R4, but we need to really know what we're doing on this deal.
So I'm looking for recommendations then. Should we bring this back up and have more discussion on this next month with and with what information do we want available when we discuss it? Or is this open-ended and we get back to it when we get back to it?
I think it looked like the zoning department looking at the zoning itself, so we see those zoning districts, that would help us make a good decision on where we should allow them. Right. I think there's some language in here. I made some notes on myself, just like, hey, why is it listed this way and can we change it? You know, because we talked about a number of permits being issued, and I'm like, why don't we do a percentage based on the number of houses available? You know, for every 1,000 houses, you get a permit or whatever, right? So I'd love to look at the zoning and then also have some information about how many single family houses do we have? How many duplexes do we have? I don't know the answer to that. But because one, I want to make sure that we have proper housing for everybody that we want to be living and breathing on a normal basis. But we know that we still have people that are going to Grand Rapids probably for bigger events and maybe want to stay outside of GR a little bit or come for Red Flannel or whatever it might be. So we know we have Airbnbs that are already being rented. And so just making sure that we're smart about that. But I'd like to look at that zone and making sure that we see the number of housing units that we have available. I think that would help us make a good decision too.
Okay.
And I was aware about this. This draft only addresses single family units, but I don't think that's fair to somebody who might have a duplex and wants to rent the other one on short term.
Yep.
If zone it, that's something we need to know.
Yeah, and I think also with that too, right, with the permit, if it is like a duplex or a quadplex or whatever it is, that the permit only applies to one of the dwellings, not all four, right? I think that's key. Just make sure we lay some things out, because I was thinking about that one too if we did make some changes. I mean, when I used an Airbnb in San Diego, it was like a quadplex and every single one was an Airbnb in the place I was at. Yeah.
More discussion, in my opinion.
Month, and we want more information on zoning and the map.
Number of dwellings and the type of dwellings too, if we have those. And I think it'd also be helpful. I mean, as we know that big apartment complex is going in, so if we know a rough estimate of future builds too, maybe within the next 12 to 24 months, that might be helpful. So we know what's actually on the docket that's being built around here to help with that growth that we know we're going to have, and then making sure we're being cognizant of that too.
And for, correct parliamentary procedure here, can we, table both of these individual items because it's actually two different items on the agenda? Can it be done in one motion or do we need to have two motions?
Make a motion to postpone other business B and C until next month. Yeah, I'll make that motion.
I'll support it.
Any other comments or concerns before we move on to that? Vote on that?
Mrs. Felge, you can make sure that we have that information maybe prior to the meeting, because I think there's a lot of data and I don't want to sit here looking at it during the meeting and like the.
Absolutely.
Also that survey results would be helpful too. That would be interesting to read through there.
Okay, all in favor of tabling the rental issues until next month, please signify with aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, we'll see those again next month. The last item under other business was D, the library parking area conceptual site plan.
So the CBDT is really spearheading this. They had a fundraising gala last weekend. They raised $30,000 in pledges. So I just wanted to share with you, it's city property, whatever that comes before you, but the city already did this. There's 6 angled parking spaces on Maple, and we put in the sidewalk on Maple. The rest, it's like $100,000 is the estimate for the rest of this. The fountain in the middle and some landscaping, 6 additional parking spaces along the northern part of this lot. Just bringing it to you for questions, comments. Is there something you dislike about this design that I can bring back to CBDT?
Fire thing is to be. Okay, yeah, I just want to make sure. I thought that's where it was. I just want to be double sure.
Mm-hmm.
I like the green space.
I like it too. Having those more parking spots is going to narrow up that road a little bit. Is there anything we can do to like put a truck route sign that would steer the trucks out to Cherry instead of up Main Street?
I guess the ultimate goal is to replace the bridge on Cherry Street, then punch Cherry Street through to White Creek. Semis would be thoroughly happy when that happens, but that's a whole lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
Over Cherry Street is a lot.
Well, I'm not even talking going that far. I'm going from Cherry to 5th instead of coming downtown with the semis.
Street was on the list for 1 or 2 years ago, but then when we redid Main Street, knowing we were going to push all the traffic to 5th, we're like, let's hold off on 5th until we get Main Street done, and then it'll just be normal traffic on 5th. 5th Street is a main thoroughfare. It has to be built for trucks rather than like Maple or, your side streets. It is on our list for this fiscal year. We haven't started it yet, but that'll be, final design through the winter with the spring paving.
When they brought the site plan, the was that the semis would go out on Cherry Street instead of going downtown, which is kind of a not going to be good when the road's going to get narrower. Just always thought that was what they were going to do, was put that part of their truck route and head the majority of the trucks out to Cherry.
From CS Manufacturing?
The newer one there by the White Pine Trail. I'm talking about.
I have asked CS Manufacturing to please post internally somewhere. They can't come down Maple. And they do. So, but
there's no sign though to direct them.
we've got, you know, contracts with 50 different companies. How can we individually let 50 different companies know? I'm like, well, they're hauling your product. Can't you require them to?
You know, but I could be wrong.
Oh, I mean, I'm not opposed to putting truck route signs.
Even one would help. But I don't know. It's just that road's gonna get narrower now. It's my only concern.
Get narrower or Maple?
When they come out on Maple to, now if they come out on Cherry Street, you don't have as much pedestrian traffic and kids and all that kind of thing. And the dust it brings up is awful too.
Well, we're not shrinking Maple Street. Maple Street needs to be repaved, resurfaced, because half of the north lane is not good pavement anymore. I mean, the plan for the heart of Cedar Springs is more angled parking on Maple.
And that's gonna narrow up that street.
But where we're putting the parking spaces is really in the right of way, not even in the street. So Maple needs to be redone from Main Street all the way to the White Pine Trail.
Yeah, it does. That gravel spot is awful. But it's just, yeah, it's,
Maple Street when we do the heart of Cedar Springs.
but that was their plan from the beginning, to send that traffic not down Maple, but over to Cherry. But there's no sign there that calls it a truck route, so that's the way it is.
Put a sign on Maple by the White Pine Trail, no semi-traffic or no truck traffic. And until we sign it, we can't enforce this is the truck route or not the truck route.
Even if it cut it back by 50% or something, it'd be kind of nice, but I don't know. I just always wondered why that was always ignored. Bring the semis downtown instead of back and towards the expressway. I can see where some of them are gonna still come downtown, but I can't see why all of them have to.
History, but if we were able to dig into the site plan that we approved when that went up, I believe we had a discussion about the direction that their trucks were supposed to go. If we had that in their site plan and they're not doing it, that seems to me like that would be enforceable.
Yeah.
Maple, where that White Pine Trail parking lot is, and just make the road so it doesn't go through there anymore. Rather than, I mean, it just ends at dirt basically past there, right?
Yeah, but we just put some millings on the west side of the White Pine Trail for additional parking for like Red Flannel Festival.
Gotcha. And you have taken it out, it can be used for expanded parking when needed. I don't know. For roads, that's why I feel like I can't talk. I'm just
who owns what, where does the Maple Street end and their parking lot begin there? That's not clear to me.
County parcel viewer.
Remember a very lengthy discussion, as I said out there, about where those trucks were gonna come out.
If a site plan was approved with that language in there, that seems to me like that's the first direction to go for enforcing.
Yeah, or at least just put a sign on truck route, go that way. Because some of them can't, or they're going to go to Sand Lake, or they're going to go to Hill or something. It would cut down on it. Sometimes you sit there and you see 10 semis coming around there, and you know they're not going north. People who come here on a regular basis, they know which way to go and stuff, but
What we're doing down there, we need to address how we're handling traffic around the heart of Cedar Springs. I mean, you wouldn't expect semi-truck traffic going down Squire Street. So we have a similar type of area, albeit smaller, but a similar area that we want to protect for certain types of uses.
Yes.
So, I mean, city council would be the one who I think would be able to designate truck routes and. Obviously, you want to work with the employer just to make sure that that's gonna work for them and you're not making it impossible for them to do business, but.
It was all designed to go that way. It just has never had a sign to tell the trucks, you know, if you can go that way, you don't have to go down to Main Street.
I think parcel mapper that's designed to have Maple go all the way through at some point, right? So it looks like.
Yeah, I mean, it was probably platted that way 100 years ago, and the road was never constructed all the way through, if I had to guess.
Well, the cars, you know, that's not such a big deal, but
They're right. That's probably why, because they had to put a bridge in. Yeah, it's probably a cost thing. So it looks like that dirt turnaround area is probably, yeah.
Beyond that, are we good with with what we're seeing here so far on that conceptual plan for the library?
It's great. Mm-hmm. I think it'll add to that Heart of Cedar Springs too. Make that really pop. I mean, that area's come along really good, and I think this will enhance that a lot. Happy with it.
Anything from us is just an informational item, right? So, okay, then we'll move on to item 11, open discussion. Of course, item A is always correspondence. And we always have the calendar. This is probably a good time to remind everybody that you don't want to show up for next meeting while people are actively trying to vote in here. And so our next meeting will be the week after. It won't be the first Tuesday. And then upcoming projects. Is there anything that we need to hear about in the correspondence for upcoming projects?
Things, but no. So.
Then I guess we'll move on to staff comments. The first person's opportunity is the city managers.
So today, effective October 1st, we are now with PCI for our building permit process instead of IMS. I had some emails back and forth today, so we understand, my staff and I understand the process, what forms go to who and who provides what form to whatever. That down. I'm looking forward to getting a working relationship with PCI and how that goes. So we had a company early September look at our property on West Street. So they looked at several sites that day. We are their top choice. They hope to have a decision soon, by the end of the calendar year for sure. So keep your fingers crossed. And then I did send out an RFP for the West Street property. Close to 20 developers. And then the Right Place has their own list of developers. Due to confidentiality, they couldn't share that with me, so they sent it out as well. But of the ones I emailed out, I had 3 companies reply and say, wow, this is really interesting. We will be probably submitting something, and those RFPs are due November 1st. Proposals come in and we can get some of that property sold and developed. Wonderful. Yeah.
Wonderful.
City clerk comments? Okay. Comments from the planning commission members? Well, I don't have anything to say either, other than thank you for everyone's work and thoughtful attention to detail tonight. There's a lot of things came up with this rental thing that honestly were nagging the back of my head, and I'm glad some of them voiced them, that maybe we need to just look at some details before we move forward. So thank you for that. Report of the city council representative. I guess that would be
me. Yeah, it's still me. My last month. And then we get a new counselor. but I'll be keeping an eye on everybody. I'll tell you what. I just enjoy all you folks and council and DDA and this. And I sat through many, many, many planning commission meetings before I even got on council and after I got on council, because I always thought they were such a part of what I had to do as a counselor. And it's helped for me to know what's going on. I guess that's all I can say. And have a happy Red Flannel Day, you guys. It's supposed to be nice and warm. I'm expecting maybe 20,000 people downtown in the city, maybe not just downtown all at once, in our huge river of red that comes along downtown. So pretty exciting. I'll be in the office if anybody wants to come in and say hi and look at all of our gizmos and gadgets and t-shirts. So come on in. I'll be glad to sell it to you. Thank you.
You. And can I just clarify, and when you leave city council, that doesn't mean you're leaving this body, are you?
No.
Okay, just wanted to make sure, because if we should probably acknowledge that if that was the case. I wasn't aware of that, so,
No.
but good, thank you.
Fun.
And report of the planning consultant.
Nothing to report.
Well, in that case, I guess we are adjourned. It wasn't bad. Hour.